Yeah. Hey, middle schoolers, welcome back to the art room. And as you saw, I had my op art from last week. I hope yours turned out this awesome as well. Well, today we're going to do one more activity involving op art. And you may be saying, Jake, what is this op art stuff? It's just a bunch of measuring and coloring in shapes. It's not for me. Well, let me tell you this. This op art lesson today is fantastic because I'm going to jam so much art into it. Let me give you some examples. Today, we're going to be working on measuring, shading, patterns, positive and negative space, fractions, complementary colors, symmetry, and finishing. That is quite a few things if you ask me. So we better get started. First thing you're going to need, again, a sheet of paper. Any size sheet will do because we have to cut this thing down into exact square. So don't worry about that. In order to do that, we're going to need our trusty pencil, the ruler, the math man's wand, you might say. Again, we need some scissors and then some sort of coloring utensil. Today, I will be using colored pencils, but you could use pastels, markers might work. I'd prefer if you have colored pencils to use those, but if you want to get really creative and try paint or something like that, I'm not stopping you. So, first things first, let's check out what exactly we need to do to get our sheet of paper ready. All right, we've got our sheet of paper here, 8.5 by 11. We've got our trusty pencil, handy dandy ruler, and it's time to do some measuring. Yep, measuring. We want to make a perfect square. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna measure 7.5 inches in on the top and the bottom and connect that with a line. Why 7.5, you ask? Well, it's going to be easiest for us to make fractions at 7.5. After I've done it the long ways, now the short ways, 7.5. Mark on the top, mark on the bottom, connect them with a line. Once we've made our lines, then it's time to cut our paper with the scissors, but my hands are sharp enough. All right, now it's time for the fractions. We need to divide this paper by 3. So 7.5 divided by 3 is 2.5. Then we are going to make a mark every 2.5 inches on each side. That means we're going to make a mark at 2.5 and make a mark at the 5-inch mark. Because 2.5 times 2 is, you guessed it, 5. Once you have 2 marks on each side of your paper, it's time to connect them with our ruler. We're going to go from the corner to each side, making sure to go to the opposite corner. Okay? Take your time with your ruler on this. Straight lines are very important. Once you've done one corner, go to the next, connecting that corner to each of the dots directly opposite from it. You will start to see a pretty cool design. All right, pretty good start. Now, it's key that we do not rush when we do this. I mentioned it before, we need to take our time. But we're not quite done yet. So now what we have here is a geometric looking figure with pattern. And it's hard to tell where the pattern is right now, isn't it? What we know about pattern is the repetition of lines, shapes, colors, textures, just about anything. If you repeat it, you're making a pattern. Now we have repeated shapes, but what we want to do is repeat colors. Just like we did on our other op art, we're going to be coloring every other spot a different color. So what we want to do is we want to pick 2 colors. Okay, we used black and white last time. They have a lot of contrast. We want to pick some colors that go really well with each other. I feel like there's a word for that. There's a word for colors that go really well with each other. and they're across from each other on the color wheel. You know what? Let me grab my color wheel. Look at that. So we have the primary, we have the secondary, we have the tertiary. What do we call colors across from each other that complement each other? Wait a minute. That's it. Complementary colors. So you probably don't have a color wheel at home, so take a peek, or you can look one up. We want to pick two colors across from each other on the color wheel. That's complementary. Now, I'm a huge fan of blue, so I'm going to pick blue. If I go straight across, I could use a red-orange, a red, or an orange. For me, I think I'm going to go with blue and orange right across from each other. Those are two of my favorite colors. So I'm going to dig through my coloring utensils and find blue and orange. That's all I'm going to need for this part. So now I need to get to coloring. All right, you should have your two colors that you chose, and I'm going to go with my darker one first. You get to pick yours. And what we're going to do is we're going to go every other shape with this one color. And if it helps you, like it helps me, I like to mark every other shape so I know where I need to color. You may notice that I'm just marking the shapes on the outside of my design first. This will make it a little less confusing than if I tried to mark up all those shapes right away. We're just going to focus on the outside and work our way in towards the middle. Before you start coloring, one thing I noticed is it helps to put a sheet of paper underneath your sheet of paper. That way you don't get the bumps and textures and whatnot from the surface underneath. Now, if you chose a colored pencil like I did, we get to work on our shading techniques. That's right, shading. So, the essence in shading, the harder you press with your colored pencil, the darker your color will be. So if you press hard on half your design, half of it will be dark. If you press lightly on the other half of it will be light. And what's the tough part here? You want to try to press the same amount of pressure on every shape so that you get a consistent color. And that, my friends, is a type of shading. So maybe pause the video if you need and get to work coloring that outside. Now that you've filled in those shapes on the outside with your first color, let's grab our second color and do every other shape continuing around our design. And we will come to a point where we will have them all filled in and shaded that we need to figure out where the next second color goes. And this can be tough, but I just emphasize, take your time, make sure you're going every other. I even had to stop and make sure I was doing it right. If it helps, think about that scribble challenge we did a little while ago. None of the same color should share an edge. So work your way around, going from the outside in, filling in the rest of your shapes. All right, I have my finished product. When I was all done coloring, I went back with a permanent marker and a ruler, and I traced those lines that I had made in pencil before. And it can be really helpful, especially when you're using pastels or paints. The lines can get a little messy, and adding this marker on top really makes it pop. So you may notice that I have different clothes on. That's because this project takes a little bit of time, and I'm not asking you to do it in one day. If you need to take 2 days or 3, take a break here and there, do so, because we want high quality work. I don't want you to rush. When we rush, we might mix up our colors, we might not have straight lines. Take your time working on this cool op art piece. Now, a few things that I want to point out before we move on is this design, you may notice, is symmetrical. Symmetrical. What does that mean, symmetrical? If you were in class, I would probably point on whoever had their hand up or maybe someone who didn't. But you're not, so maybe I'll just let you know. Symmetrical means if I were to cut this thing in half anyway, it would look identical on each side. So if I were to fold it like this is going to look the same as that. If I were to fold it this way, this side looks the exact same as this side. It is a perfectly symmetrical design. So much so that I could cut it diagonally, up, down, side, side. Any way I would cut it, it would be identical on the other side. Symmetry, very important in art. So can you guess what asymmetrical is? That's when it's not symmetrical. But this baby is so symmetrical, there's no way you could cut it and make it asymmetrical. Pretty neat. Secondly, we have positive and negative shapes in this bad boy. What are those? Well, when we think of positive and negative space, positive space is the space that our subject of our art fills, the space that it fills, and the negative space is the space around it. So if we were to think of that in terms of shapes, we have some positive shapes. Let's say those are all of our blues. And our negative shapes are the areas that our blue is not in. That would be all of our orange areas. Or I could flip that around and say that my orange is the positive and blue is the negative. Just remember this. Positive areas in art is that space taken up by the subject of your art. And the negative space is everything around it. Pretty cool. I told you I was going to jam a lot of art into this thing. All right, we have one more step in making this a high quality finished work of art. All right, what you're going to need is a colored sheet of paper. I'm using black construction paper. You can use whatever you have at home. You're going to need a pencil. Again, we'll need a ruler. We're going to need scissors. And lastly, a glue stick. Now we want to cut this sheet of paper down so that it's slightly bigger than our perfect square. So our square was 7.5. I'm going to go for 9. That way there'll be a black border around my whole artwork. And again, we're going to make a mark at 9 on the top, 9 at the bottom. And you'll notice my paper is exactly 9 inches wide. So I don't need to cut it that way. I'll only need to cut it down the middle. And again, we want to make sure that we have a straight line. All right. Perfect squares are going to make our artwork look so much better. Once we have our line, it's time to cut. I use my ruler. You might want to use the scissors. It's a little better. After that, we are going to sign and date the back of our sheet of paper. And then we're going to use a glue stick and glue our artwork directly in the middle of our sheet. All right, we have our high quality finished work of art. This last step of mounting it on this paper was our finishing step. Yep, finishing. Artwork just sometimes needs one more step to really make it pop and look well done, which I think we did here. I hope you enjoyed our adventure, our quick pit stop into op art or optical illusion art. It's pretty fun. It's a good way to combine math and art, colors, and everything we learned about. And there's so many more ways to make op art than just what I've shown you. Feel free when you have time, look up some other ways op art can trick our eyes and make some pretty cool designs. All right, until next time, hasta la vista, students.